Welcome to the United States Army War College and this new faculty development session. We are pleased to welcome you to the team, and we hope and trust that you will find the coming year to be a rewarding opportunity as we together help to shape the thinking and expertise of War College students. This presentation will identify some best practices for writing assessment, or more simply, we will share some information, ideas, and tips so that students write well. At the strategic level, the writing facility is a needed competency. Indeed, it's an essential tool. I'm Larry Miller, Director of Communicative Arts, and Sipos is our experienced and accomplished writing instructor and writing coach. Here's our pictures. That's Larry on the left and Ann on the right. Ann, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Larry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the War College. My name is Ann Sipos. I teach the Effective Writing Lab and provide basic strategic arts program writing assistance. As a civilian employee entering my 4th year here at the War College, I'm excited to share some formative and summative assessment best practice tips, techniques, and strategies to empower new faculty to effectively engage and collaborate with War College students as they navigate the challenging writing process ahead. Again, welcome everyone. Back to you, Larry.
Thanks very much, Ann. I've been the Director of Communicative Arts at the War College for 16 years. In that capacity, I provide guidance, assistance, and support to both students and faculty as they negotiate oral and written communication requirements and opportunities. Most of my work has involved written communication. I have received, reviewed, and processed approximately 6,500 terminal student documents, mostly strategy research projects, or SRPs. SRPs are generally what is recognized in most colleges and universities as a 20-page research paper. I've helped in getting well over 100 such student documents published in refereed venues such as Joint Force Quarterly, Military Review, and Parameters. Quality professional academic programs, in my view, encourage students to make meaningful contributions to knowledge, and publication is one way to do that. By way of background, I have an honorable discharge from the United States Marine Corps. My PhD is in Communication Studies, University of Michigan, and I'm a War College graduate, Department of Distance Education, class of 2009. Why is writing assessed? What is the purpose of writing assessment? How is it done? What avenues or approaches are available? Writing is assessed because it demonstrates thinking. We're interested in thinking about strategic concerns and national security issues, and thinking is often captured by writing. The purpose of writing assessment is to improve thinking, to identify, address, and mitigate, if not solve, problems. Assessment proceeds along 2 avenues: formative, in which the mentor offers non-judgmental encouragement, corrections, enhancements, and functions as a supportive and helpful coach; and summative, which is where the faculty render a final judgment on student progress. Our goal is to prepare effective strategic leaders who communicate well in writing, which entails skill and ability at developing well-organized, coherent, convincing, evidence-based arguments, writing with economy, clarity, precision, and style, contributing to strategic discourse and understanding, documenting sources appropriately and avoiding plagiarism, and finally, selecting appropriate forms and formats for any intended audience. Ann will offer some recommendations and approaches for helping students improve their writing facility in a few minutes. I want to shift focus just a bit. First, to present the newly adopted United States Army War College grading scale for summative assessments, and then to overview the Graduate Skills Diagnostic, GSD, which provides an initial snapshot of language facility and writing by incoming students. First, the grading scale. This is the scale and grading policy for all summative assessments beginning this year. In the past, we have used a 5 through 1 scale where faculty judgments of student work were categorized as outstanding, exceeds standards, meets standards, needs improvement, or fails to meet standards, with meet standards as the acceptable mark for graduation. The new policy aligns summative assessment with what is standard practice in civilian institutions of higher education. To graduate and receive the degree, students must have a 3.0 grade point average. Memorandum 623-1, which details student assessment, will be available soon. But what you see on this slide is the new grading policy at the Army War College. I'd like to shift from summative assessment to well before formative assessment and advise as to the initial information you can expect that captures student writing facility at their point of entry, the graduate skills diagnostic. Each incoming student is required to complete the graduate skills diagnostic prior to arrival at the War College, although international fellows complete it on-site after arrival. The GSD provides a snapshot of student facility with the conventions of English and writing and is used primarily to help identify students likely to benefit from supplemental writing assistance. That is assistance in addition to that routinely provided by seminar faculty and project advisors. The GSD consists of 50 objective items that are machine scored and a brief unscored essay. The diagnostic is timed and students have 1 hour to respond to the items and write the essay. As noted, the performance on the GSD is used to identify students likely to benefit from focused writing coaching, and they are seated in the effective writing lab with Professor Sipos. Upon entering War College, students come from wildly diverse backgrounds with regard to writing. Their skill sets are highly variable. The GSD provides a snapshot of their facility with the rules and patterns of English and writing. The GSD information will be provided to faculty by seminar groups. The next several slides summarize what you will receive during or before 0 week in early August. The GSD report to faculty will be by seminar and will include a statistical summary for the entire class. The information on this slide is for the incoming distance education program, class of AY22. The summary report details the range of scores, central tendencies, score distribution, and standard deviations. Generally, students tapped for seating in the effective writing lab score 1.5 standard deviations below the class mean. The ungraded essay serves to help distinguish incoming students who write acceptably but performed marginally on the objective items. What this slide presents is a partial report for an individual student. Faculty will receive a report for each student in their seminar. Each report will include information about the student's performance to include raw score, points correct, percentage correct, and time on task. In this case, student number 1 scored 74% correct, where the group mean from the prior slide was 65% correct. And the student completed the GSD, which included writing the essay with about 1.5 minutes to spare. The diagnostic automatically terminates at 60 minutes. A running clock is displayed continuously to assist with time management. Note too that the essay prompt is provided along with a statement of what is expected. After completing the objective items, students are to write an essay in which they identify the 3 most important characteristics of a strategic leader. The essay is to include a thesis statement, the 3 main points, and a conclusion while convincing the reader of the importance of the 3 qualities chosen. The next 2 slides provide a partial exemplar of an effective student response. This slide presents the opening paragraph from student number 1's essay, and it serves as a solid, clear, and direct thesis statement. The 3 most important characteristics of a strategic leader are vision, communication, and influence. Without these characteristics, strategic leaders will not achieve their desired results. The following slide includes development of the initial strategic leader characteristic that the student identified, vision. In this paragraph, the author elaborates on vision and supports by citing an example. Vision serves as one of the most important characteristics of strategic leaders. Vision allows a leader to see the bigger picture and come up with a plan to solve issues at the strategic level. For example, solving the strategic problem of COVID-19 requires a leader to assess the problem and figure out how each portion of government can contribute to the effort to flatten the curve and lower the number of deaths. Vision allows a leader to see that simple measures, such as relying on medical effort alone, are ineffective. The balance of the student's essay addressed the other 2 characteristics and offered a conclusion. So this example for student number 1, while incomplete here, is suggestive about what right looks like. So what I've presented is intended to alert you to the new grading policy at the Army War College and institutional expectations with regard to the writing competencies expected of effective strategic leaders. Additionally, to help support working with your students, I've previewed the GSD, the initial writing assessment provided to faculty, and how that information helps identify students likely to profit from targeted writing support through the Effective Writing Lab. One small final note for your information, the GSD reports this year will also include a note on a reading assessment, a measure presently under development. At this point, I want to hand off to Anne, who will share her thoughts, experiences, and insights about how best to help your students write well. Anne, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Larry. New faculty should now view the word cloud slide. This word cloud illustrates the nearly overwhelming assessment challenge you face, but don't worry, I can help. I've taught various high school and college literature and composition classes for more than 25 years, and I've graded literally thousands of papers over the years. Typical teaching load for me looked like 5 to 6 classes a day with 25 to 35 students per class, with students submitting papers every 2 weeks. So as you can imagine, this was a really demanding workload. I was grading stacks and stacks of papers weekly in addition to my regular teaching responsibilities and coursework. Early on in my teaching career, though, I really struggled with balancing and managing my workload because I was drowning in papers. I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. Because back then I felt I needed to spend more time marking final papers and fixing errors in order to help students improve their writing. I did far too much copy editing too. And I often felt frustrated then after spending all that time, all those countless hours providing lots of helpful final feedback and commentary, only to discover and realize that most students weren't processing this all-important guidance. Quite simply, students had tuned me out. I had provided too much feedback too late. Most students just looked at the final grade rather than at all the final comments I provided. My laborious assessment process had overwhelmed me and my students, and more importantly, I had missed valuable opportunities to promote student learning and improve student thinking and writing. So something had to change. Something had to give. And that's what I'd like to share with you today to enhance your War College teaching experience. Years ago, I experimented with various assessment strategies and then integrated more effective feedback methods to manage my workload and improve student thinking and writing. I started holding formative pre-writing conferences and prioritizing content, organization, and style feedback in both formative and summative assessments. I also started using a writing assessment worksheet, which I'll show later and also save to Teams for your convenience. But I also started using a writing assessment worksheet in addition to course rubrics and writing prioritized global and local comments. And these customized assessment best practices can really help you as you embark on your Army War College teaching journey. So the method to my grading madness is largely formative in nature, and ideally, instructors should negotiate this formative guidance prior, I'm going to say that one more time, prior to rendering a final summative judgment to final drafts. World-class instructors proactively engage in help during the pre-writing, the formative pre-writing, developmental pre-writing process. And you'll find that fiercely independent War College students are not used to asking for any writing help, especially as that exposes them, it exposes their vulnerabilities. And it can really be a cathartic experience, but overall, at least initially, it's a truly humbling experience. Students usually suffer in silence, but you, as new faculty here at the War College, you can change that. So I'm going to share my best practices here with formative assessment. And the number one tip, right, is to know your students. Know your students and seize that incredible learning opportunity that you have. Engage early, make a difference. How do you do that? How do you start right away? Well, while not required at the War College, I encourage you to hold pre-writing conferences with students to enhance quality, save time, and maximize success. And here, I cannot stress enough the importance of these pre-writing conferences. It can make a world of difference. It benefits students and instructors alike by facilitating great learning, promoting better thinking, and decreasing stress and assessment time. A total win-win, okay? How do you do that? Well, think about it this way. Writing is all about making important decisions, but how do you make those decisions? You've got to generate the content, right? And then make those decisions. So best way to start is to encourage students to experiment with what I call the 70-20-10 writing process, right? It's a great strategy to discuss and share and encourage your students to follow. Now, the 70-20-10 equals approximate 100% project time. So these 70-20-10, they're approximate numbers, but what do they stand for? Okay. You'll find that many students, when they start writing, they open up their laptop and just start hammering away on the keyboard the night before an assignment is due, or maybe even the morning an assignment is due. And we can do better than that. So you've got to switch up their current process, their current writing strategy, because it will just not prove effective. It won't help students realize their potential and develop into really terrific writers. So the 70-20-10 for most students at the War College, when they enter, when they start, their numbers look more like 5-80-15 or something like that. So I'm going to talk to you about front-loading all the pre-writing. I'm going to break down the 70-20-10 now. The approximate 70% is called pre-writing. Now, pre-writing is when students spark and generate ideas, and then they can make important decisions, right? It involves at first, identifying and deconstructing the assignment, the prompt, completing all reading, scrubbing, researching, looking for evidence and supporting examples possibly. And then, they're doing all kinds of brainstorming, free writing, perhaps whiteboarding, writing assertions, mapping, clustering, sketching, outlining, graphic organizing, mind mapping, thesis crafting, conferencing, and workshopping. So that's why that approximate 70% is such a large portion of the overall writing process, which really tends to be iterative sometimes. So when students actually figure out what it is they want to write about, they've thought about it, they've made those important decisions, they've crafted their thesis statement. Now it's time for them to craft and create some type of mapping mechanism, so to help them think through the whole project from beginning to the end and realize all the various components. So you really want to encourage students to start thinking about these writing assignments before and during course readings rather than after, because it's all part of that all-important pre-writing, okay? And you'll also require students to, during this pre-writing, develop a reasonably developed, or I wouldn't say fully developed, outline, graphic organizer, or mind map. You'll want to look at thesis statement with roadmap partitions, and also look at their strategy, right? How they've mapped out subsequent body paragraphs in conclusion. Now, I'll talk later in this presentation specifically about the ASA method. I'll help you make sense of it. But so that encompasses these approximate 70% project time of the writing process. What does the 20% mean? Well, once you've shared, prioritized meaningful, constructive, one praise, two pointer formative feedback with students regarding their fully developed outline, graphic organizer, or mind map, then they can revise that strategy, right, that approach before writing a single word, before writing that discovery draft. So that approximate 20% ratio in the writing process, that's drafting. So it seems like a really low number, but in reality, if you've mapped out your overall approach, you've filled in, the material, the content for all your paragraphs to include the introductory paragraph, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. You've mapped out everything. You've listed the evidence, the supporting examples you're going to use, and maybe the student has jotted down some analysis and discussion and included all that. The paper itself is all mapped out from the beginning to end. And that really benefits the student. So that's why the approximate writing time should look like 20% of total project time, because they have a map, they have a guide, and the students should discipline themselves and not deviate from that guide because you've provided feedback on that guide, right? So during your pre-writing conference, you can take a look at that outline, graphic organizer, or mind map and weigh in. You can provide this prioritized, constructive, formative feedback in the way of this one praise, two pointers method, because students, you'll find early on in the academic year, students really struggle crafting effective, compelling thesis statements with roadmap partitions, especially if they haven't written an academic paper in years or maybe even ever, because writing is all about making decisions, and students need to think through and generate this pre-writing content, then synthesize that information, select that all important content ideas to help inform this thesis approach. But students must fully pre-write to make all these important decisions and structure the paper from beginning to end. And then you have a great opportunity then to review and during these pre-writing conferences, and then weigh in. So it's terrific for the students. So what I mean by one praise, two pointer method for providing feedback, I'll talk more about that in the next slide. But just very quickly, you find something that they've done well, and then you offer encouragement for revision regarding two issues that you see in their current pre-writing approach. So, for example, you can say, hey, I think you're really close to developing a truly compelling thesis statement, but you need to practice concision and to arrive at greater clarity, which will then improve subsequent body paragraph structure. So you really want to be really quick with your while you're targeting this the praise and the pointers, and try not to overwhelm the students. Just prioritize that feedback, and students will listen. They will listen. Okay. All right. Moving on. So when you engage early in these formative pre-writing conferences, here's just a little bit more specific guidance for you. Now, this is where you get to really perform the triage for students, right? And you'll find that during these pre-writing conferences, many students, hopefully most, right, well, they'll have these sudden epiphanies, right? They'll have these light bulb moments, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I mean, the elevator doors are opening. They're like, aha, oh, got it, okay. And then you just see the cogs in the wheel churning, right, in their minds. It's a great thing. So these pre-writing conferences, they should be really quick, okay? 10, 15 minutes. You're busy as new faculty with a new course load, new responsibilities. I mean, your schedule can be quite hectic, but investing early with students during pre-writing conferences, early in the writing process, can make a world of difference, and it'll save you time and help students maximize success. Okay, so again, 10 to 15 minutes during these conferences. You manage your schedule however you'd like. You can schedule, 5 conferences a day over a 3-day period. You could knock out conferences all in one day. Totally up to you. But when you do meet with them, explicitly address student questions regarding the assignment, the task, right? And how to best approach the writing requirement. Ask the student, what specific questions do you have regarding your writing? And those initial questions can really shape and focus the conference and help address the student concerns and the concerns that you see also in the current approach in that fully developed outline, graphic organizer, or mind map. Now, I require my students to write specific questions on the top of their fully developed outline, graphic organizer, or mind map to help focus the conference, right? It's a collaborative effort, and it works exceedingly well. But these questions, I encourage them to write, and I just limit it to 2, maybe 3, depending on time, but they shouldn't be typical yes-no questions. So for example, if a student writer asks, is my paper good? Well, chances are you're going to say no, right? And if the answer is no, then the student just gets frustrated, right? It's just not helpful, and it just wastes time. What you can encourage students to do, while writing questions, is to craft questions such as, how can I improve and fortify my thesis statement? Or where should I develop or organize body paragraphs more effectively? Or something like, how can I incorporate source materials effectively? But there are all kinds of great questions that students can use to help focus the writing conference and help them on their way. So just moving on. So you'll have to, during the writing conference, evaluate whether the student has actually addressed the assignment prompt effectively, right? You'll really look towards the thesis, and this is where you really practice the triage here, because you will find that, especially early on in the academic year, that students will sometimes write book reports rather than persuasive arguments. So, and know that students experience difficulty sometimes while trying to understand and respond to assignment prompts. So weigh in early, engage early, help them get on track. And this is not hand-holding. This is not, a waste of time. This targets student effort and time. And you'll find that once you help them with have these epiphanies, these light bulb moments here, things will take greater shape, and you'll receive much better final products from the students. So here's where I want to talk about this ASA method a little bit more to help you. Okay, I borrowed this method from the DDE program, and what ASA method means is that, write down the acronym ASA. The first A stands for the assertion topic sentence in a body paragraph. Okay, the assertion topic sentence. That's the overall argument with the appropriate roadmap partition prong. The S stands for supporting examples or evidence. And then the final A stands for that all-important analysis and discussion. Because let's face it, you don't want the students to just share with you what everyone else thinks about this important topic, right? You want them to weigh in. So what's really helpful is there's a 60-40 ratio that I share with my students, and I apply that to persuasive body paragraphs or body paragraphs overall. And that's an approximate ratio again, but 60-40 ratio. The 60 stands for the writer's voice. So what do I mean by that? Writer's voice encompasses the argument and the analysis and discussion. And so the material in each body paragraph should come close to that 60-40 ratio. Maybe it's 50-50. I don't know. You can work that out. You can negotiate that with your students, but you want to hear what the students have to say. You want to listen to their agency, right? Their argument, their analysis, their discussion of the supporting examples and evidence. And the 40 ratio represents the supporting evidence and examples that the students incorporate into their papers. So in a pre-writing conference, you can look within the student's fully developed outline, graphic organizer, or My Map, which they can Google if they don't create their own, by the way. But you can look at each body paragraph as it's broken down. You can look at the various elements, and you'll find, especially early in the year, that a lot of students neglect to incorporate their discussion, their analysis within the body paragraphs. So you can always share that all-important guidance with them. And I will make available to you the ASA method with the 60-40 ratio. I'll make that available to you after we finish building the Applied Communication Lab website. We're currently building it now. It will hopefully be finished within the next month or so, and we'll provide more resources there. We'll hang them there for your convenience. So moving on, another way to evaluate student writing during these pre-writing conferences and provide guidance is to make sure that students have incorporated enough evidence from seminar readings, from their discussions, right? Possibly other professional academic sources, and maybe students will have to scrub online too to gather more sources. But you want to make sure that they incorporate not only enough evidence, but sufficient, like effective evidence. Okay, just make sure that they're doing that. So as you do that, you'll prioritize this formative feedback and respond with the one praise, two pointer method that I talked about. So, and when you provide this formative feedback during the pre-writing conferences, remember, students care about what you say. You've got a great opportunity here to promote learning, thinking, and writing. But students will listen. They care what you say. So you'll want to identify and share one positive thing that they're doing, right? Find it. Hopefully it won't be too difficult, but find it. Then move into two areas where students can improve the current approach before they actually begin drafting the paper. And here's where you really want to offer some specific guidance to get them started. For example, you're really onto something here. This engaging topic could truly be compelling, but it needs a more focused, fortified thesis statement. Also, disorganized body paragraphs need to follow paragraph structure. Another example, you can say to students, hey, great thesis with word partitions, really well done, but you need to revise these sprawling sentences and avoid overusing illegitimate passive voice, as that current approach impedes clarity, concision, and coherence. Something like that. Just stay simple. And as you write these one praise, two pointer examples, you can always save them to a Word document too for later use if you so choose. But once you start, it gets easier, and the students definitely appreciate it. really helps. So moving on with a little bit more pre-writing conference guidance, you want to look at the thesis statement, of course, right? And the supporting examples, related materials, but you really want to triage this guidance, okay? And make sure that students are on the right track. Thesis is critical. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But look at the course materials, the seminar discussions that they've incorporated, the topics, any related materials they've incorporated. Look at, is it sufficient? Is it effective? And take a look also at the point of view that students will use to craft their thesis, that they use to craft their thesis, and also in subsequent body paragraphs. Now, you have decisions here, you have options, right? I prefer when students craft thesis statements using third-person objective. That's my pet peeve, and I'll share some examples in later slides about the difference between using first, second, and third-person point of view. First person, that's the I, the me, we, our. Second person is the you and your. And third person is the he, she, it, one, they, them. So if you can, avoid using first and second person pronouns. Avoid using the I, the me, we, us, the you, the your. Why? Because the most concise and clear writing doesn't use personal pronouns, okay? Even avoid using the he, she, it, they, them, the third person. Try to eliminate those whenever possible. And you can also engage, just to make sure, look at that mapped out outline, graphic organizer, or mind map. Make sure that students have fully mapped out the paper beginning to end. Okay, if they still need to think about some recommendations, or they still need to mitigate risk, or they still need to draft a conclusion, right? Make sure that they think through that first before then writing. Because again, writing is all about making important decisions. So they need to think through all content areas, solidify those decisions, incorporate those decisions into an organized whole, all before they start writing. Another guidance option is to ask the students whether they've carefully tracked sources that they can later cite. So sometimes students will say, oh, I'll remember where that is. I'll remember where to gather. I read it last week. I know exactly where it is. But make sure they're carefully tracking their sources, right? Because that'll save them time and effort while they're drafting. They can just incorporate things and then use the Chicago and Trabian to cite those sources appropriately. They don't have to go in search of, and it'll save them a lot of time. Now, the thesis is critical. Okay, this is when you triage. Go right to the thesis. Be predatory about it, because you'll find that approximately 99% of students need immediate assistance with crafting effective thesis statements. Informative pre-writing conferences can really help students craft these solid foundational thesis statements upon which they can then build structured essays. So I just want to talk about thesis statements quickly, just to kind of set the foundation here. No pun intended here. But a thesis statement, by definition, is the controlling idea or main point of an essay. And writing guru Kathleen McWhorter states that when you write, think of a thesis statement as a promise to your reader. The rest of the essay delivers on that promise. the thesis is essentially the platform, right? The foundation in terms of the argument and controlling idea that is supported by the scaffolding, right? So consider the thesis as the platform or the foundation upon which the rest of the paper is built. You have to triage and make sure that students start building with a solid foundation before they add to the structure, before they add with assertion topic sentences and supporting examples or evidence and analysis and discussion, because otherwise they will be all over the place. They'll their body paragraphs will spiral. They'll offer tangential ideas. I mean, really solidify the approach, the thesis approach, before they move on. So effective thesis statements ideally accomplish two goals. They introduce an issue and they advance a stance with reasons and claims. And students can't ride the fence here. They need to take a stance. They shouldn't be writing book reports. They should be writing persuasive arguments. Some more thesis tips to share with you here, both by tried and true best practices. Faculty often need to help students, as I said, craft and or tweak their current thesis statements during the pre-writing conferences. So again, students struggle with crafting these effective, compelling thesis arguments. But these conferences, this pre-writing assessment will really help them, and they'll actually learn how to write more effectively for future assignments too. So a thesis should ideally advance a specific assertion that is relevant to the assignment or task, right? It should address the parameters of the assignment, the parameters of the task. It should be substantial by making a claim. It should be supportable by proving with evidence and research. It should be precise by being narrow and focused. It should be arguable, right? Not factual or some type of factual statement. It should always be, people should always be able to argue it, okay? Not factual. And then the last one here is kind of debatable. A thesis should be, ideally, it should be original, but that's not always possible here at the War College, though, because students are writing papers based on the same topic, and so there may be some rehashing of views and positions by others. But 1 through 5, definitely follow those components, those requirements for crafting a compelling thesis statement. And then number 6, the originality component, well, that would be frosting on the cake and not always possible. But moving on, I just wanted to talk about the differences between open and closed thesis samples here to help you provide proactive, formative assessment during the pre-writing conferences. And these open and closed thesis examples really serve to illustrate the two different thesis styles. A lot of people haven't heard the terms, but that's okay. You've seen them, you've practiced them. So let's take a look at the first example, the open thesis statement. It's open-ended, right? It's an open-ended controlling idea and argument only, okay? Economic sanctions are ineffective options for achieving international political objectives. This open thesis statement is grammatically correct, but you'll notice that as a reader, as an audience member, you do not know how the writer will prove said argument. There are no answers to the how, when, where, why, to what extent, to what degree addressed. So I'd like you to consider how the next example, which is a closed thesis example, consider how this closed thesis statement is, again, grammatically correct, but how it encapsulates and aligns the roadmap partitions to help students with organize subsequent body paragraphs. So I prefer closed thesis statements, and we'll take a look at this one. It serves for a basic 5-paragraph essay, but for me, I think it helps students stay organized. And you'll find your students not only struggle with crafting the thesis statements, but also they struggle with the body paragraph development and organization. And this method, utilizing the closed thesis statement method, can help satisfy both of those area concerns, the thesis and body paragraph development and organization issue. So if you look at this example, the closed thesis, economic sanction options are ineffective for achieving international political objectives for 3 reasons. Sanctions are typically too modest. Severe sanctions unduly impact the civilian populace, and assorted rogues can exploit the economic void when sanctions are severe. So here you have the argument. You can easily understand the argument, you're not having to mine for it later in the paper. The argument is clear, and you can also notice that also understand the attached reasons or claim partitions, the roadmap partitions. They're clearly mapped out and organized. So as a reader, you can track the argument more easily and the claims and the reasons with these forecasted, roadmap partition prongs, which then the student can revisit, right, in the subsequent body paragraphs. So it works really, really well. And again, students will have more epiphanies here, and they will not know the difference between an open and closed thesis. So you'll have to help them. And again, these closed thesis statements, they can take many forms. This one is a little over 20 words. Yes, and that's absolutely fine. But know that there are options. Students can practice more concision for greater clarity if they'd like, and stylistically present closed thesis statements differently. The options are numerable. Okay. There's one other example here that I just have for your own edification, and I practice a little bit more concision, not much, but it's just to show that there are different options available to you. Okay. So moving on, how can you help students practice thesis concision and clarity? Well, I've got some specific examples to talk through with you. So if you look at the first example, right, it's 4 sentences and 53 words. In this paper, I will analyze Clausewitz's theories on war. Then I will examine the nature of war and the character of war. Next, I plan to show how Clausewitz's theories are relevant for today's strategic planners. Finally, I will discuss specific concepts and applications of X, Y, and Z to Clausewitz's theories. So I found this student example, and I wasn't able. I found this after the fact, after the student had already submitted the paper, so I wasn't able to weigh in. But I want to show you how you can practice concision and clarity to get to this point here, which I've essentially halved that thesis, and I've really arranged things more appropriately. So if you go back to the first example, in this paper I will analyze. Well, think of it. Okay, yes, look at the agency. This student is writing in the first person. Okay, and a lot of this material, it's fluff. It's redundant. I know that the student is writing the paper, so I don't need them to tell me or to present in this paper I will analyze. Well, that's the task. They should be analyzing. They don't have to share with me that they're analyzing. That should be apparent, right? So you can strike, in this paper, I will analyze. Then I will examine. Third sentence, you can strike, I plan to show how. Again, it's all fluff. And the fourth sentence, finally, I will discuss specific concepts. I will discuss. Strike it. Look into the sentence. Identify the true subject. In all these 4 sentences, see if you can practice concision and clarity and combine these 4 sentences into one fully developed sentence by eliminating that fluff, right? Focus on the prime real estate. What's the true subject? Now, this student has done a great job because they arrived at this point, but they just need help with getting to the next step and solidify those ideas, and and eliminate the fluff, all the extra the unnecessary redundant ideas, to focus and distill the approach moving forward. So that's your job as faculty, to help the students. And once you do this, again, these light bulb moments, and you're triaging, the thesis is critical. Once you get the thesis right, it just helps with everything else in the paper. So what I've done here is, I helped, I just, excuse me, I revised this thesis statement, this 4-sentence thesis statement, and then I front-loaded the true subject, and I incorporated those important concept threads, and attached all, and I answered and attached the how, when, where, to what extent, to what degree, those kinds of questions. Again, lots of options available, but closed thesis statements take many forms. Your job is to help the student find the form that works for him or her. And so it reads much more concisely and clear here. Clausewitz's enduring ideas about the nature of war and the changing character of war remain relevant for contemporary strategists because of X, Y, and Z. So just by reading that, as a reader, what the student is arguing in his or her paper and how they're going to go about unfolding that argument in organized subsequent body paragraphs. Okay, another example for you. Again, this particular student really sparked all kinds of creativity or whatnot, but this thesis with partitions, 64 words. It takes a long time to really present the important ideas. And if you look into this example, just like the previous one, you kind of have to mine and almost guess as to what the true argument is. You don't want that. So again, look into the example and perform triage. Okay, help the student identify the true subject and attach the concept threads and form a truly compelling thesis statement that will clearly present the topic, the argument, and then organize the rest of the paper. So this sample on the left, this wordy, fluffy sample on the left, 64 words, can easily become the example on the right that I revised. Modern planners should apply Clausewitz's insights regarding centers of gravity, war as a card game, and continuous political interaction to aid in developing focused and flexible operational approaches supported by broad assessment plans. Now, that's essentially 25 words. For some people, it might be a little wordy, and you can practice different ideas, add a semicolon, break things up a little bit, however you want. There are options, but this closed thesis really distills the student thinking and organizes the student writing. And that is your job. And you'll find that the more you practice helping and triaging with students, the better you'll get, and the better they'll get as well. So some other best practices include formative peer evaluation sessions. So in my writing coach arsenal, I've created self and peer evaluation workshop sessions that I use with my students. I've shared them with some course directors and other faculty to use at their discretion. And it's great, students, you've finished the pre-writing conferences, you've provided the one praise, two pointer method, you've given students engaging, helpful guidance to revise, and then we're moving from that approximate 70% of the writing process into the approximate 20% drafting process. So they are drafting their discovery draft, that first fully developed, fully written rough draft or discovery draft. And it's from here that you can incorporate these peer evaluation workshop sessions into your seminars. You can include them into your instructional time. They can take 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the assignment. You could do that after class. You can, share this with your students and say, hey, I want you to do this outside of class or have a brown bag lunch session. You can do this in small groups. You can switch papers with just another student from a different seminar. The options are endless. But the important thing here is that you, as an instructor, you don't have to go through and evaluate their discovery draft, their rough draft. You've already evaluated and provided that all-important guidance during the formative assessment. So you're essentially just waiting. You're addressing any I guess last-minute questions that arise, but you're really waiting then for the students to submit their final drafts for you to then evaluate. But the students themselves, especially if they're ambitious, and let's face it, War College students are, peer evaluation workshops, they'll do a lot of the help, the additional help for you, so you don't have to weigh in as much here. And I can provide these workshop sessions. I'm happy to do so. So just contact me and I can share. Moving on. So some best practices for summative assessment. Okay. So we're moving on really from the formative assessment into that final summative assessment. That's where you really start to render judgments, right? So ideally, students have they have participated in some type of peer evaluation workshop to address any other concerns, and then revise accordingly to that for that final approximate 10% of the writing process. And then students have submitted these final drafts for you. So how do you grade? How do you grade this stack, which 15 papers for a seminar? I wish I had that kind of stack in my previous teaching career, but it's really doable. But what I found though, when I collect the students' papers, what I do when I collect them that afternoon or maybe that evening, right? Immediately, I do a quick cursory read. I read through them and I quickly examine those papers and I sort them into two piles. And this is when you get a chance to use that Harry Potter sorting hat, if you will. But you'll quickly read through the papers, and you'll consider, does the paper answer the prompt, satisfy the requirements? Does it incorporate appropriate content and evidence? Is the evidence effectively organized? Is it logical? Is the paper written in the correct template? And has the student cited materials using Turabian and Chicago manuals of style? So again, this is super quick. You examine the papers and sort into those two piles. The one paper, the acceptable papers following the 5 questions below. They're acceptable, they're to be graded, or you'll have, and hopefully not many, you'll have the unacceptable, the to be returned, the rewrite pile. Now, all the formative pre-writing assessment prevents rewrites, right? Those peer evaluation sessions, those prevent pre-writes, and it will really save additional work for instructors, because by limiting the number of rewrites, by triaging early and noticing perhaps even any plagiarism, potential plagiarism concerns, right? That you would catch those issues earlier in the writing process and provide student writers the opportunity to revise accordingly, appropriately. So if you have then, and hopefully you don't have any rewrites because you've engaged early, you've made that difference early on. But if you do have one or two rewrites, immediately schedule rewrite conferences, not only to discuss and clarify any writing concerns you notice, but also to establish that writing suspense. Because you'll find that students who struggle with writing, if they need to rewrite a paper, then they're quite often working on two papers at once. They're stressing about the rewrite, they're working on that, trying to finish that up, but also they've started another course paper and they're working on two papers simultaneously. So that can be additionally challenging for students. So by engaging early, that really limits that type of issue. So summative assessment, this sheet here, I just listed, it really piggybacks the information from the previous slide, so I'm not going to review it in its entirety, but this is a great workshop. It's really handy to have with you. I just posted on my desk wall, and I just have these questions handy. So when I start reviewing papers, it keeps my initial assessments focused, my initial and my formative and primarily my summative assessments focused. And again, if students are participating in peer evaluation sessions, they should have identified many of these concerns and remedied them. Okay. So again, you can print this out and just have it handy for when you need it. So moving on, you've finished that cursory first read, and now you're moving into that second read. This is where you really need to focus and manage your time, because ideally you want to only spend 20 to 30 minutes rendering judgment on these papers from this point forward. So it's really challenging with my first tip, right? My first technique, because it's the second read for the paper is when you evaluate the paper holistically. But here's the catch: don't make any marks. Don't use any pen or highlighter or anything. Don't make a single mark. Really discipline yourself. And just try to focus and process the ideas as you encounter them in the paper. You'll also notice some organization and style elements at work too, but really discipline yourself. Just focus on processing those ideas. Just read all the way through it. And then that will make your third read much easier, because you know what's in the paper. And this will help you limit local content, organization, and style comments. And this is where you really get you have the opportunity to mark positive and negatives quickly and avoid becoming a copy editor. So for example, I like to use check marks for satisfying writing components. Following that ASA method, I'll just have little check marks for each assertion, topic, sentence, and for each supporting example or evidence, and then for the analysis and discussion portion of the body paragraphs. But I also use, I'll quickly comment. I can add, interesting idea, or maybe something like AWK to stand for awkward, or WC for word choice, or other, quick editing, proofreading marks. So if you don't have a copy of those and would like a copy of proofreading marks, just let me know and I'll share what I have with you. No worries there. So during this third read, this is when you're making those quick marks. And again, it's quick. You don't want to invest too much time and effort here because you should already know what's in the paper, how it's organized, right? Now you're just going through and processing and making a few quick marks and noticing things with style as well. So you'll want to employ the required course content, organization, and style rubric that departments share. It should be in the course directive. And again, that will help focus your judgment efforts. And then you can also use what I discussed a little earlier, the one praise and two pointer global comments, right? You'll write those quickly, and within them you'll prioritize content, organization, and style feedback. So what you could do, and when you write these global comments, I should just add, carefully, thoughtfully, tactfully provide prioritized summative feedback so that students can understand the grade they earned, right? And also work towards improving future writing, okay? So if you write, for example, a comment in capital letters and in red pink, really, question mark, question mark, question mark, students are just going to tune you out, right? They respect you, but this whole process can be, it can make them resentful. It can make them respect you a bit less if you really don't address these comments tactfully. So I'm sure you will. I just had to say that very quickly. Okay. So one example of the one praise, two pointer global comment statement that you could potentially write. For example, it could read like, this unique topic is truly compelling, but it still needs a more focused, fortified thesis argument to help organize subsequent body paragraph structures. Also, avoid wordy and awkward sentences as they impede concision and clarity. I mean, you can write all kinds of one praise and two pointer global comments, and you can even create a spreadsheet or a Word document and list them there too. So you can cut and paste as applicable. Really up to you. But something else to help you render summative assessment is to apply the written assessment check sheet that I constructed. And I'll show you in subsequent slides what that looks like. Again, we will make this available. I'll make this available to you on our ACL lab website when we finish building it, but I can also hang it in Teams for you for your convenience, or you can just reach out and contact me and I'll send it to you. No worries there. But for this written assessment check sheet, all you have to do, and this saves tremendous time and effort, right? All you have to do is then check boxes in the check sheet. Check the boxes to indicate areas of improvement needed, okay? And again, by doing this, we'll really save you time while covering the assessment spectrum. So hopefully, assessing War College student papers won't be as laborious now, especially if you engage with students early and hold pre-writing conferences to provide formative guidance and help students make those needed changes before then you render the summative assessments, and should make that process that much easier. So now you know the method to my assessment madness, otherwise known as best practices for assessing writing. So just before Larry discusses a few final points, I'd just like to provide a quick overview of the writing assessment check sheet that I discussed in the previous slide. It's basically my last 10 slides. And it's in print form. It's available in print form. I just want to show you the different areas, and I'm just going to scroll through them. I'm not going to talk about each one. Again, I'll hang this check sheet in Teams and make it available to you in the Applied Communication Lab website after we're finished constructing it. So the writing assessment check sheet, again, it's here to help you. We've got the three-part mission assessment. Goals for student writing, and I have to add one other thing. You can also encourage students student writers to go to access the Effective Writing Lab online. It's available via Blackboard, and it's kind of like a smorgasbord, if you will, of a la carte features for writing assistance. And it's self-paced, self-driven, but it's really a terrific resource for students to have, especially if they hesitate to ask for help in these areas. So that's also available. Tremendous resource. So different areas in the writing assessment check sheet. Again, you're just checking these boxes. That's all you're doing. And that indicates to students that they need to improve in these areas. So you check presentation, the template formatting boxes. You can check the unity and cohesion introductory paragraph components. You can check unity and cohesion in the body paragraphs or in the conclusion paragraph. You can check unity and cohesion within the sentence structures in the body paragraphs and the transitions that the students have provided or not have provided. You can check boxes for support, and you can make additional editing marks here regarding diction and passive voice. Illegitimate passive voice usage is a big one. That's something that War College students really weigh in on. Additional editing check sheet options for you to notate regard sentence skills, punctuation, spelling, okay, all of that. But those are all important resources for you. And again, I'll hang those in Teams and under the ACL Lab website as soon as I can. So Larry, back to you.
About the best assessment practice questions, feel free to either email Ann or me. And if we get enough response or justification, then we can set up a time on a Teams meeting and we can kind of dialogue and engage together. But do send Ann a note and we'll put together a team session. So that pretty much wraps up what we've got planned for the best practices for writing assessment or helping students write well as part of the new faculty development for the entering the class of AY21. We hope that as you adjust to the situation and welcome the opportunities, you'll recognize that this is a special mission. There are only 6 war colleges in the country. Each service has one. There's a national and Eisenhower School down in DC, but those 6 institutions are the primary places where senior military officers are prepared for developing strategic insight, advising people, making judgments and decisions, and advancing our strategic interests consistent with national values and U.S. interests. So we hope that you will seize this opportunity to do well and know that we at the Army War College and the Applied Communication and Learning Lab stand ready to assist you as faculty in any capacities we can and students as well. We're all on this mission together. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Stop recording.